Okay, so I'm changing the date of when you have to have Streetcar read from the February 18th to February 23rd, so that you finish the movie. Okay, there we go. So the reason that I do that is because this was meant to be seen, not necessarily read. It's Tennessee Williams, the way he wrote it and he revised it for publication, like he kind of is a playwright that had in mind that people can read the play and that would be a different kind of experience than watching the play performed. But as a playwright, like in its sort of real form, it should be on stage, right? And it should be in a room full of a bunch of people, and we should be watching performers live and reacting to it all together and getting that feeling of watching a play. There's a lot of like differences in watching something staged versus reading the way that it's staged. That should be kind of obvious, right? And so I want to watch it the way that it was staged, at least as close as we can get to possible. And the movie version, Tennessee Williams was the one who adapted it. So it's the same playwright adapting it for the screen. And the guy who directed the play on Broadway originally, Elia Kazan, he's the director of the movie. So there's a lot of like faithfulness that he has. He still will use some things in the movie that couldn't be done in a play. So let's talk about that really quickly. What are some differences do you think between like a film form and a stage form that we should watch out for as we're watching it? Brooklyn?
And this is kind of vague, but like in movies, you usually get like a lot of more focus on certain characters. Like you can, like you have the cameraman who can like zoom in rather than just like sitting and doing.
Yeah, exactly. So you get cinematography in a film, right? So you can the film can focus your attention on certain things. A play can't do that. It's a little bit more of a democratic process watching a play. Like you sit down in the audience, and if you want to just focus on the person in the background the whole time, you are free to do so, you know? If that's, you know, your friend is in the play, you can watch your friend in the chorus the whole time, you know? But in a film, you don't get that opportunity. The film director is going to be a lot more controlling of where your gaze goes, right? What else would be different then about the film, the form of the film versus the form of the play? Yeah.
Just the overall perspective of like the cameras. You can feel like from above, or you can feel like from like the side, you can like tilt it.
Yeah. And that has so much dramatic, emotional intent behind it. You know, you tilt things and everything feels like it's off kilter. You blur things and give it a kind of soft focus, and suddenly everything feels a little more feminine and romantic. You go down below and the people in the frame look huge and powerful. You go up above, they look weak and small, you know, and all of those decisions, when a director makes those decisions, they're doing all of that in order to influence your emotions. I always say manipulate, but that's such a negative connoted word, you know, but it is. It's to influence your emotions as you're experiencing the thing. Whereas a play, it's going to be, you know, you have your periphery vision. It kind of depends where you sit in the audience, but you're going to be able to take it all in at a kind of eye level, usually. Yeah, Dalen.
The lighting.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So like, you're going to see in this play, especially like this kind of, I said soft focus before, you're going to see soft lighting too. And it's going to be like from behind or from above. It's going to make certain characters look angelic. And then there's going to be hard lighting to make certain characters look very masculine too. And that, you can kind of mimic that or not mimic it. You can kind of do that on the stage, but not to the extent that you can in a film. Kylie?
Plays are like super personalized, I guess, because like depending on where you sit, how high above the stage you sit,
yeah,
you get a different perspective. But movies are like everyone gets the exact same thing. Or like if you get one play on, you know, Thursday and your friend goes on Saturday, the Thursday cast could make like a mistake and like it could be like a funny little thing. Yeah. But yeah, don't really do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So everyone's experience of watching the movie is controlled in the same way. That's a really good point. Yes. The other thing I want to point out about Brooklyn's comment about like where the camera's positioned and how it's focusing your attention. One thing that a film theorist very early on said was the thing that made film unique is the close-up. We don't get close-ups in other photography, but we don't get close-ups in the theater. And being able to get that close to another human's face, I talk about this in my film classes sometimes. When are you that close to another human's face in real life? What?
Smooching.
Yes, when you're kissing them or when you're threatening them. That's
Oh.
really it. If you're like pulling someone up to you and you're like, oh, I'll get you, right? Like, it's only in these very intimate situations when you're that close up. And if you get to a certain distance, you close your eyes. Like, I mean, if you're kissing, you don't open your eyes. And if you do, you're a weirdo, so stop. I'm just kidding. But like being that close to someone else's face, it's not even with the people you are most comfortable with in the world. You don't want it to last very long. But film forces you to. So they put that face right up against the screen and you see, exactly what their eyes are doing and the way their like lip is trembling, because they're about to cry, and you have to like confront those emotions. And it's uncomfortable sometimes. It's a different discomfort on the stage. Have you ever sat in the front row at a play where there's a lot of crying in the play? Oh, that's a weird feeling. I saw Our Town once, which is full of crying. And the stage, we were right up close to the stage. And the boy in the play is just right here sobbing. And my friend and I were just like going like this, like trying to get away from him because it was so like intimate and we don't know this guy, So it's a different kind of uncomfortable, but film really like puts us right close up to those faces.
Was that the school production?
No, but that one was wonderful. Did you go and see that one?
I was in that one.
That's right. Of course you were. It was sophomore year for you, right? Or no, it was last year.
Mm-hmm. No, it was sophomore.
Sophomore year. But did I know you sophomore year?
You didn't.
No, but I remember you in that play.
I was the milkman with the southern accent.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I remember you. It was the accents. Yep. That's right. I loved that play. I knew the two leads. What were they? I always forget their names. Yeah. Carson was the boy, right?
Yeah.
The blonde boy, and then blonde girl. What was her name?
I can't remember.
Me neither. Oh, she was so good in it, though.
He touched her butt. That's all I remember from the play.
He touched her butt?
Remember?
No. I don't pay attention when teenagers are touching each other's butts. And that's for the camera. Okay, hang on.
But outside.
Yeah, no. All right. So anyway, the other thing that I want to point out about the difference between film and a play, and this is another one of those things that theorists have said this is the main difference that makes film, is editing. So that you can put two images next to each other, splice them together so that they directly speak to each other, right? So if you're reading a play and two people are talking to each other, you don't imagine it kind of going back and forth. It's more like, usually the way you'd imagine it is just like, Jaden and I are talking to each other, so you kind of like think of us both in the frame, right? But on a film, they're going to cut at times that they want you to kind of see the contrast between the two images. Film theorists will talk about how one image has a meaning, the second image has a meaning, but sticking them together creates a kind of third meaning. And if they had put them together in a different order, that would make the meaning a little bit different. So that's something else to look out for. Okay, so we're gonna watch the movie. Even though there's all these differences, it's the closest we're going to get to the original production of this play. Couple trigger warnings without giving anything away. The movie deals with domestic violence, and it gets tough to handle at the end, I think. It isn't rated, this movie, but I'm guessing if it came out today, it would probably be PG-13, probably. I'm going between PG-13. Like, I think that the violence and stuff is implied enough that they might say it's PG in certain circles. The way they rate movies is it's just a bunch of parents who get together and rate the movie, so it's hard to say. Did you know that?
What? Really?
The MPAA is a group of concerned citizens. They try and get kind of like a random sampling, and they all get together and they decide, well, this movie has 2 F words, but the subject is important enough that we're going to let it be PG-13 anymore. It's really arbitrary. There aren't really like firm rules for any of it.
If I was on that thing, I would make every movie R.
Every movie, just a lot of movies like will push to be R because it means that they'll get like taken more seriously.
Lilo and Stitch, R. Or Aliens.
It's R for, yeah. Anyway, so you signed the disclosure at the beginning for movies, and I don't remember anybody saying they couldn't watch it, so I think we're good there, but it's just something to be aware of. Okay, let's talk about Tennessee Williams before we watch it. So he's the writer. He was born in Mississippi. He's got one of these fancy names, Thomas Lanier Williams III. I don't remember why they called him Tennessee. I don't, but they did. And he was born in Mississippi. He moved to St. Louis and kind of grew up there. So he's a Southern boy. His family was not a good situation. His mom was pretty emotionally abusive to him, and his dad was physically abusive to him. And so it's like he was getting, all of these expectations placed on him that he didn't feel like he could meet. And they were really, really concerned with masculinity. So it was like if Tennessee Williams did not present masculine enough, his mom would call him a sissy and his dad would hit him, that kind of thing. So it was like he had really strict moral upbringing and a really strict kind of like gendered upbringing. And that it becomes really important to him because he did not fit into those gender molds very well. His father really wanted him to be on the football team in high school, so he tried out and like did not make it, not even close, because he was like, I preferred poetry instead. That's what he said in an interview, and his father was like furious about this. Like that was the extent. It's like even when you can't meet, the team goals, they're going to be mad at you for that. As a kid, he was also kind of sickly. He almost died actually from diphtheria, which is it's like I know there's like a high fever with it, and I think it's a stomach thing, right? Anyway, he was very sick, and he was in bed for many months with that, and it gave him like time to read. So he looks back on that time kind of fondly, because that was when his parents weren't like criticizing him for not going out and being sort of a rough and tumble boy, but he got to like read poetry and do what he likes to do. His best friend in the family, he was very, very close with his older sister. Her name was Rose. And when Rose was quite young, like in her late teens probably, she was diagnosed with schizophrenia. And so they sent her to a mental institution at the time, and she lived there for the rest of her life. And at some point, a few years into that, they gave her an experimental new treatment, which was a lobotomy at the time.
Oh, no.
So a lobotomy is where they go through the eye socket and they scramble up the brain. Not much, it's with like a long kind of ice pick thing. Not much science there in the 50s. It was just sort of like, we know if we do this, the patient becomes a little bit more complacent, a little bit happier. And she was, honestly, she wasn't ever the same again. She didn't have the same intelligence or awareness, but she was kind of calm and satisfied, which is what they wanted from her, right? And Williams was close to her. Tennessee Williams was close to her until her death. He actually died before her. She lived a very long life into the early 90s, I want to say, is when she passed. Tennessee Williams, even though he loved to read, he was not good at school. He did not commit himself to his studies. He would bounce around. He went to college, but he bounced around from college to college as he failed out of one and then the other. But he always was kind of single-minded and always wanted to make plays. So at each college, he had a sort of opportunity to produce and direct and write plays. And that's what he wanted to do. And it was like, he definitely knew he wanted to do this. And so he wrote his first play, like official play that he tried to get published. It was called The Glass Menagerie. Did anyone read this last year? So that's his first. Is this all sounding familiar in this story? That's his first play. An agent, her name was Audrey Wood. She was pretty famous. She kind of discovered that. And The Glass Menagerie was an instant success. It pushed him into fame. So anytime a writer has their very first thing that gets very, very famous, at least it seems, a lot of anxiety comes with that, because you have to make now the second play. This happened to F. Scott Fitzgerald too. His first book, This Side of Paradise, was extremely popular. And then the next one, not so much. So by the time he was trying to write Great Gatsby, he was just like really down on himself. Tennessee Williams was kind of in that phase after Glass Menagerie. It was like, it was great that it got so famous. It made him so that he could be a playwright, but it meant that the pressure was on. Streetcar Named Desire was his second play. That was his follow-up. And so he met the challenge. Streetcar Named Desire was even more famous, more successful than The Glass Menagerie. Partially because it introduced to the world a new actor named Marlon Brando, and people very much liked him. anyway, when he was like dealing with this sort of like, call it the sophomore curse, is what they would call that, where it's like your freshman effort is great, your sophomore effort, seems scary. His anxiety and depression, it started to get the best of him, and he started taking a lot of sleeping pills and drinking heavily. So that kind of starts his history of addiction, which continued through his life. He was also, so from there, he had a string of successful plays. Actually, you go and read them. It's like Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Rose, what's it? There's a bunch of them. He just had a bunch of plays in a row. Now, the Iguana, that's one, that were extremely successful, all adapted into films, all adapted on stage and in film. Like, he was a big success. And a lot of the themes in a lot of them are very similar too, which is interesting. But even though he was very successful, he was one of those guys that like he gets 99 good reviews and 1 bad review, and he was just like, everybody hates me, like I'm worthless, you know. That bad review just speaks very loudly in his head, and so his addiction got worse. At 71, he was only, I mean, that's actually quite a long time to live for somebody who drinks as heavily as he did. Like, he appeared in multiple interviews, completely sloshed, like he was not okay in a lot of ways. But he lived till 71, and the way he died is horrifying. So you ready? He got addicted to barbiturates and amphetamines, which is like the same thing that like Judy Garland was addicted to, just uppers and downers, just like regulating all day long. And he took them out of, like, he was taking it out of a nasal spray cap. So he like took the nasal spray cap on and would take the pills and take it like this. And somehow he inhaled the cap as he was taking the pills, and he suffocated to death because it closed off his breathing tube. What's that? Esophagus? There we go. Yeah. So he was trying to take barbiturates and inhaled it and died that way. Which is just, it's so awful. No, I know. He died because he was, I mean, probably very high trying to take more drugs. Last thing to know about him, going back to how he was, you know, critiqued by his parents for his like gender expression. He was one of the very few openly gay celebrities in the 50s. Yes, and he would talk about it in interviews, and it was always in a kind of coded way. But everyone knew what he was talking about. So he wouldn't go in the interview and say, I am gay, right? But people would say, like, do you have any girlfriends or boyfriends? And everybody would sort of like wink at each other, and he would say, yes, the latter, or something, you know? So it's like everyone knew. He was very proud of it. Like in the 50s, I can't like state enough how unusual that was, that he was just sort of like, this is who I am. He had a ton of gay friends in New York, and even though they were sort of closeted, he was like out and proud, which is seen in a lot of his plays as well, like the way that people are dealing with sexuality and heterosexuality and homosexuality kind of is, both of them are discussed in this movie. So that is my intro to Tennessee Williams. Do you have any questions or anything? Okay, cool, because I don't know much more than that. So let's watch the movie.